Right, thank you. Here's one. So yeah, hello everyone. I'm Maurice. I work as a front-end web developer at Longtail here in Perth. There's a few of my coworkers. So before I go into some actual CSS and JS code examples, I'm going to take you a little journey and some words about animation, of why do we actually have animation in the first place. Well, why do we have animation in the first place? Well, to paint a picture, our first UI screens kind of look like this. They did not have animation, and you would go between screens and it would just jump cut to the next frame, right? So scientists actually figured out that once you're working on these screens, your brain is just focused on this screen. And once you go to another state, you jump cut to another state, you kind of get brought out of that processing power, and you have to think, where did I go from? Where am I now? How did I get here? Who am I? So they figured out that the frontal lobe of your brain, which handles visual perception, is perfectly capable of offloading that information. So you can just keep focused on what's important on that screen and let your brain handle the I had a fancy word for this spatial awareness. So yeah, that would fix jump cutting between frames. So fast forward a couple of years, the World Wide Web had matured and Adobe Flash has become super popular. Animations were cute and colorful, but they were just overused and just fighting for user attention, really. The websites had fancy splash animations, buttons were shouting at you, and we just really got distracted by distracted from the content that really matters. You weren't seeing the content anymore. So it all had to be toned down a bit. We had to apply what we had learned from interface design to motion design as well. So just a little bit later, when old mate Steve Jobs wrote an open letter to not use Flash anymore, we kind of had to step up the game to develop and standardize CSS animations and specifications across all browsers. So it took some time for all browsers to settle on one spec, and that's the story on its own. But as Flash was phasing out, support for CSS was phasing in. And as interface design for mobile phones became really high in demand, as it is like at its peak right now, I feel like, motion design became an important tool for interface design, so to speak. A great example of this is the material design guide Google made around 2014, I think. It really gives you an idea of how motion just tells a completely different story. Like, it just helps you keep track of how did you get to that screen, that calendar screen, for instance. So yeah, it really makes you think about animation and to present information more meaningfully. I have a link available to the actual material design guide at the end of this presentation if you're interested. So what are some ways to apply motion design as an interface designer to make a more meaningful experience? Well, here's a list I found, which I think really helps you approach your problems, approach your website, and see how can you hack your website to make it more a meaningful experience. And transition experience, for instance, if you go between presentation slides, like it goes the wrong way. Sorry, didn't see that? It goes in out of the left, comes in from the right. So it keeps track of where you were and where you're going to. That's an example of a transition animation. Another example of here is this voice app. Keep your attention on the blue button there, which is, I think, stands for record. It just opens up this whole, another state, if you will. Like, you're traveling between states. It's really hard to, it's low frame rate. The Google Inbox is an example of material design. That's a bit small. There we go. Trick I just learned from Julie. So when you press play, you start off in an email list, but as you tap that email there, you kind of move all the other emails out of the way, and you zoom into the email itself. It's like you're moving a stack of paper out of the way, which is exactly the metaphor material design is going for. Supplemental is an animation as a pattern which will add secondary information to the main state. So this could be anything from notifications, alerts, updates, shopping carts, updates, auto suggestions, etc. But as you can imagine, these are easily overused. So the trick is to stay subtle with these animations, otherwise your user might confuse it for, do I really want to sign up for another newsletter? Which is just, become blind to those kind of things. In this example is when I was shopping for makeup. When you see it, I'm adding this to my bag, and a shopping cart comes out from the side. Let me actually pause that there. If you didn't see that. So the shopping cart comes into screen, which is a supplemental animation, but then also this progress bar fills up, which is another supplemental animation, which tells you, oh, you're $12 away from standard shipping. I should probably buy more makeup. In case you missed it, in here is a different pattern called feedback. Because I clicked on this button and this thing starts twirling. And this is basically telling me, hey, I saw you clicked on this button. Let me actually go back to the database and grab what you're looking for and then put it back on screen. It's telling you, you click this button. You don't have to, you have to wait for a second. The site is working. Let me get back to you. It's one of the best patterns that's not used as much in most websites, actually. It's another great example of a combination of the previous ones. So you click on a button, and then this auxiliary information of the percentages come at the screen, seeing how far you're on into this downloading, and then it tells you, oh, check, it's done. It's all very delightful animation as well. It's very seamless. This is probably one of my favorites, like very functional. Like we've all been on Facebook before, and the layout loads, the styling loads, and the content takes a while to actually load in. So what you get is like a skeleton structure of the where the text is going to be and the approximation where your profile picture is going to be. So that's actually quite a recent trend compared to the other ones that's popping up. Is to have like where it's going to be, like that's where they're going to put it. We're expecting it to be. Demonstrations is basically, well, you're just showing your product and how it works, right? It's a visual representation of how something should work. It could be a product or some action you just did to give a metaphor of what you just did. This is when I did my tax return in 2015. The screen fades away, it puts things in an envelope, like as a metaphor for, oh, well, we packaged everything up, we're sending it off to the cloud, I guess, and then it arrives and it's checked, and you go back to the main screen. It's like you were brought along the journey of what happens after you click send. An example of a product being put together might be tiny. Boop. So this is near the end of some Burger King website. This is a scrolling website, and the burger is just being assembled as we scroll through it. It's pretty rad. So as you can imagine, this works great for scrolling websites or parallax websites, or if you have a design like an infographic, you can just put all these things together as you scroll down the page and make your point clear of your story you're trying to tell on this website. The key point for demonstrative animation is that they're insightful. They add something. They don't add something. They put your story or context into a perspective. One example of zoom out. In contrast, decorations, they are very similar to decorations are very similar to demonstrations, but really its main purpose is to add flavor and delight. If decorations are the fats and sugars of the animation food pyramid, they make great flavor enhancers, but moderation is key. The Flash Splash intro animation from 8 years ago were some examples where it's just being overused. That's not to say that not having animations which don't fulfill a purpose are sins. It's just perfectly okay to add some delight to your project. This is an example that popped up quite recently on everyone's feed. You guys might have seen this. This is just amazing. It's not obtrusive at all. It's just, let's see that again. The Yeti, yeah, once you focus on the email screen, it looks at it, and once you start typing, yay! And if the email is valid, it's like super yay, and it keeps following you until the end. And it puts its hands in front of its eyes once you reach the passport. That's just amazing. I love that one. I love animations like this. I think you get a lot of these on Dribble, and there's a repository line called UI animation. All these links I'll put on some README file somewhere at the end of the presentation. So using these approaches, these patterns, to figure out how you can make your website more meaningful, more engaging. You can also have bad user experience, such as loading times or flashes of unstyled content. You're basically staying on the same page, but you're doing some sleight of hands, basically, to keep things working on the back, while you wait for things on the back end to come back to the front end. If you're considering implementing a complex animation, keep a check on how CPU intensive your animation is, because they do tend to get pretty to ramp up the old fan sometimes on the laptop. Now, if that happens, you can be sure that if you watch this website on your mobile, your battery will be drained in like 2 minutes, or unless you got like a fancy new Windows phone, or I don't know what's the current good phone. Another thing to know hardware-wise is to keep your frames per second, make your code performant and optimized. So this way you're able to hit that sweet spot of 60 frames per second. If you're going through a website and it's just smooth, it just feels like it's well performed, like you trust this website. If you're going anywhere below, let's say 30 frames per second, you start to notice jank. If you're unfamiliar with jank, it's that effect that happens when your browser needs to drop frames in order to keep up with your animation. So it will be stuttering, juddering, and just plain halting sometimes. Basically, when you play any of these animations, I guess, this just smooth, but this could be jank, so to speak. If you'd like to know more about this, come grab me after. There's a whole more theory about this. There's also reaching a very natural animation that's like an organic movement. Before I bring out the extra code examples, I'd like to point out this concept. So let's say you laid up your animation, you might face a challenge of looking the more organic. Disney animators have a thing called the 12 principles of animation. I won't go into all 12 of them, but that's what they use to make their work more organic. It stems from the idea that you can apply physics to your movements. Elements have momentum and respond to forces like gravity. So it takes time for it to speed up or slow down, and it travels in curved lines instead of straight ones. I think an example is if you, on a Mac, and you use this thing, it kind of just, the fan stack, I think it's called. So I just picked a few of them which added the most animacy to a project. Wow, and enter there. Ease in and out, that's probably one you guys have used before because it's so readily available in CSS and JavaScript. It's basically just, accelerating and decelerating at the start or end of the animation. Imagine a shopping cart or a sidebar just coming in from the sides and coming back in and It doesn't go like this. That's very robotic, just smooth. Squash and stretch, you might see these in like tooltips or modal pop-ups. They just come up on the screen, or if you're on a Mac, when you're got notifications in your dock, they might just pop up. I have that all the time when someone on Slack tries to DM me. It's like, hello. Follow through and overlapping action. That's something you'll see on a lot of scrolling websites. As you scroll down, content kind of just animates in from the bottom, like it fades in. It's like you're going through a stream or something. Some other websites, if you scroll down and up real fast, you'll see the elements actually having some kind of ease or follow through, I guess. Anticipation is when you hover over a button and it makes you, gives you an indication that you can do something with it. Like it gives you an idea that something can happen after this. I just explained Arc with the cool fan. So the other ones are super important as well, but I'm not going to go in all of them. But each single one of them you can apply to make a more like organic, human, or natural movement. Well, let's see. You basically have three approaches when you make animations for the web. In terms of coding, CSS transitions and CSS animations, well, they're both CSS, I guess, but they do have different approaches why you would use this. CSS transitions is usually when you have two states, like a start or an end state, you just slap a transition line at it, and it will now transition 250 milliseconds between my badass color and this blue. I'm gonna say this. When you have more keyframes, if you will, or states between you want to animate, you have to upgrade to CSS Animations. As you can see at the bottom there, it goes to 3 different states on the start, middle, and end. In this case, I think I'm actually animating some rainbow. I think you've seen it on my buttons earlier, the patterns, when I hovered over it. The cool thing is that once the animation starts or ends or goes through a loop, you can actually catch those events in JavaScript. So if a certain animation ends and you want to make sure something else starts, like a sound or like it goes back to the start of some other thing, or a video starts, you can catch that event in JavaScript and display that. But you can also start more CSS animations, and it gets very complex. So yeah, if it gets too complex, you might consider upgrading to JavaScript instead, because you just have more control over how you create your timelines. This is an example from pretty much the industry standard of TweenMax by GreenSock. I didn't make up these names, sorry. GreenSock has been around the animation for web industry since a long time. This is basically the same syntax of what his animation library was like in Flash, the Flash days, and ActionScript days. So there was, if you were an ActionScript developer back then, it was pretty easy to make the jump to JavaScript. There's actually an exciting new API coming out, a new feature coming out for upcoming browsers called the Web Animations API. If you haven't heard of this, just means that this kind of syntax is built into the browser, so you don't have to include any new animation APIs. Sadly, Edge is lagging as usual, so we're not quite there yet. But as I was making this presentation, I read that Google actually has an amazing polyfill available, so you can actually get your feet wet on Web Animations API, which I'm probably going to do tonight. After this, if you have some really fancy animation you want to do, like 3D or some weird stuff, you're going to have to upgrade to Canvas. Canvas is basically an HTML element you put on the page, and with JavaScript you have a broader graphics API available. There are some amazing libraries like 3JS, D3JS, which enables you to make amazing polygons and everything. For a relatively small, I've been for here before, for relatively small kilobytes, like the libraries are really small. I know where I'm going next. Let's just jump there. So I'd like to walk you through the approaches I made with these kind of examples. This is a 3D cube. It's 99% CSS. And the way you set this up is, let's see if this is readable. Is this readable? Let's imagine just this is the main container, and this is the first instance of this cube, which is just 0 by 0 pixels. I need to have that there because I can just move the entire thing around if I wanted to without having to worry about offsets or anything. The center point of this div will determine the locations of these other 6 cubes. Now I will quickly move things around so it faces me for what I'm about to tell you. It's so easy to just do this in the DevTools. So the idea is that every div here is a face of this cube, which I'm offsetting with transform. So if I do this, you can see this is the front of the cube, which if I translate C, I'm just moving it towards the camera, if you will. This is the back of the cube, obviously it goes in minus. For this side, the thing you have to know is the transform property. It matters which order you put. No. It matters which order you put your properties in. So first it does a rotate X, and then it does translate C. So what that means is that first let's see, which one is it? So first it was facing towards me, and then I twisted it, and then I applied the 150 pixels offset again. So every face here has a 150 pixel offset, basically. So you have to apply this specific style here. I hope that's readable. It's preserve 3D. This basically says everything in this div, which is a child of this div, will have to retain like its 3D properties. If I turn this off, it just becomes a flat, like so, which is weird. The only JavaScript I really did was to keep track of my mouse position and have a variable called, if this is top left, this is 0, 0, and bottom right is 100, 100. That's just some calculations you can do. But apply them as the perspective origin of of its parent. What that does is whatever you put on your canvas, on your whichever HTML elements you put on your page, they will all move in unison with whatever the perspective origin is. Kind of imagine it being a camera which you're pointing anywhere, and all the elements will just move in place. This way you don't have to move everything on interaction, on mouse move, or on scroll. You just change the perspective origin. God damn it. All right. One of my other favorite text effects is this one, which is basically a SVG. but I'm changing the effects of it with CSS, and I did not make a SVG of the actual text and put it on the screen. I just use the here we go, the text fields for that, and applying these effects to it. So what that means is I can use any font to, what's a popular font? Cursive. Was that a smiley? Already can use any font here to apply this effect to. Of course, everyone's favorite, Papyrus. Let's see if I can grab the animation here. So there's a keyframe animation here. Can I get the code? Text, SV text, yeah. This is the, I'm using Gatsby, by the way, to make this thing, but so it might have been a bit obfuscated. Hope you can get it. So there's just text in here. Like, yeah, SVG styles, where are they? These are the CSS things that are applied to it. It's just the offset I'm actually animating probably. And and in the actual SVG, they all have a separate offset. Oh, it is being handled there. So that's a effect that actually has quite a big, every browser actually can run this because it's all in SVG. Have time for one more demo? How am I doing? Yeah, okay. Just keep going then. This is also a popular effect which I found interesting to explain. So these are really just two diffs, and I'm applying a SVG effect to it. So as you can see, just two diffs, and here's my SVG. How that works is, if I go into the SVG, there's just a definition and a filter, so I can apply this filter to any element I have on the page. This technique works that, if I find a little overlap there, how this works is every circle there gets blurred, and then it gets flattened again, so it becomes a circle again. And then it's putting back the original image on top of that. I hope I can illustrate this by removing these for a second. So here it is blurred. And here you can see that it's not unblurred, it's kind of made whole again. It's really weird. But you see these effects pop up every now and then. And it's highly performant and amazing if you're done right. Let's see. The sprite sheet had an interesting technique I found the other day. This is the, if you're on Twitter, who's still on Twitter nowadays, but if you're on Twitter, if you press the like button, it gets this cool animation like this. What you used to do with this is you grab your sprite sheet, and with JavaScript you keep offsetting the background position. So every 200 milliseconds you go to the next frame until you reach the end of this. But you can do this in just CSS with keyframes as well. This is sprite sheets. With just a few lines like so. This is the animation. You're going from background position 0 to 100. And the magic number, the magic property here is you're doing it in steps. So it's not interpolating through the entire the entire way, just showing 28 keyframes for the entire animation. Okay, I've got one more frame I want to show you. Oh, what was that? Didn't see that. Yeah, one more thing I want to show you. I hope you can help me out with this one. It's my last frame. Thank you. It's working.